Pauline Hanson is demanding the money from corporate tax cuts due to the big banks be set aside for victims of their misconduct. She wants the banks to lose the tax relief following their inexcusable behaviour exposed at the Financial Services Royal Commission. She said today, "I would like to see the money quarantined from the company tax cuts, that the money is actually paid back to those people who have suffered at the hands of the banks." The other comment that she's made today is the fact that the taxpayers shouldn't pick up the bill for this Banking Royal Commission. The banks should in fact be paying for it. I don't think there'd be many people listening to us this afternoon that would disagree with any of those comments. Pauline Hanson is in a busy schedule today. She's taken the time out of that busy schedule to join us on the program this afternoon. Thank you for your time, Pauline.
My pleasure, thank you.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm still recovering from my trip over in Afghanistan, which was full on. So, so the weekend at home was good.
Can I ask you, why did you go to Afghanistan, Pauline, firstly?
Right, there's been raised on the floor quite a few times, especially the Greens and belly aching that we should actually pull out of the Middle East. Also, over the last year and a half, I have been dealing with soldiers with PTSD. And it was an opportunity, because there is a parliamentary program to actually go to any of these areas, about 20 in total around Australia or over to the Middle East, for parliamentarians to go and see what happens with our Defence Force and the personnel. I chose there as my first one. I wanted to see for myself. I actually have had concerns about, our being in the Middle East, and I thought, no, it's good to go and have a look at it. I'm pleased I did. It's the country of Afghanistan. They've had a lot of problems with insurgents, as we know, the Taliban, and also ISIS is now moving into the country. With the coalition forces there, they're actually keeping them at bay, and we are actually helping the country rebuild itself. So I spent a couple of hours with the Afghanistan National Army and spoke to the brigadier there. They're quite happy with Australia and the coalition being there to mentor them and helping them rebuild their army. We're actually helping with the policing, whereas, with corruption and policing is coming along, and the elections of this year. So hopefully give them their democracy and take it out of the hands of the Taliban, and the country has been formerly run by warlords. So the people now have a longer lifespan, from 48 years to now 51 years, and, the insurgents are still there. But by being there as one of the coalition forces, it is giving the country hope and the future generations to hopefully live in peace.
Did you think we should pull out of Afghanistan before you went there?
I wanted to satisfy my own concerns about it, but I believe the ISIS and the Taliban have reduced in their control areas in Syria, Iraq, and in Afghanistan by the coalition forces being over there. So what's happening now is that if we pulled out too soon, before the country can stand on their own 2 feet and protect themselves, it will be a waste of not only money, but more importantly, lives that have been lost. They will see it as a big win around the world. Those fundamentalist extremists here in this country will see it as a win, and we will have more problems, and their tentacles will spread around the world. Is
there one particular single thing that you took away from your trip there that you remember?
It's speaking to the soldiers, these young, men and women who are so proud, and the morality is very, very high. They are extremely, I've got so much pride for them. I really do. It's not easy. It's tough. I actually, slept in the same quarters as them, and I showered, used the same bathrooms, and it was no VIP treatment. I was one of the soldiers, and it was interesting to spend time with them. I know their families are doing it tough, and I know when it gets to the end of their time, they're ready to actually come back here. And having spoken to the chaplain over there and spoken to the psychologist, there are problems and issues that these soldiers do have, but we've been dealing with that even from the Vietnam vets and former war veterans. But the thing is trying to understand them. I could never wear their shoes for a day, but it's all about trying to understand. They are a defence force. That's what they're there for. They put their lives on the line, which I totally appreciate and respect. And the thing is that they're protecting our freedom in this country.
I read somewhere on Friday where you said that one of the soldiers said to you, "Tell people back home that we enjoy being here, we're doing the right thing."
Yes, he did. He said, look, Miss Hanson, he said, I've been in the Army for 6 years, and he said, when I got over here, he said, that's what it was all about. My training in Australia, this is what it's all about. And he said, we want to be here. He said, they're putting across that we don't want to be here. That's not the case. And another soldier said to me, he said, my son says to me, why do you want to go over there, Dad? And he said, I told my son, you train for your footy team. And he said, you do your best and all that hard training. And then at the end of the day, son, do you want to play in the B team? No, you don't. You want to play in the A team. And he said, that's what this is to us. We are in the A team. All that hard training and everything. They are soldiers.
Pauline, have you had the opportunity over the last couple of days, particularly over, last night, to catch up on the interview that was on the ABC with Kelly O'Dwyer yesterday, where she was answering, or didn't answer, more to the point, the question about the Banking Royal Commission?
I've heard parts of that interview and her comments with regards to it. She was sidestepping the issue. She wouldn't accept responsibility. They should have had the Royal Commission prior to it. And that doesn't surprise me. On the very first day of my having a meeting with the Prime Minister, I actually said we need a Royal Commission. Why? Is because my former Senator Rod Carlson was one of those primary producers that lost his property. It's because of that my attention was drawn to it. And during that the time I with Rod, I saw documentation. There was forged signatures from the banking sector. I spoke to families. We travelled around. We had inquiries. And even to this day, my office is still assisting those people from foreclosure from the banks. We've actually saved about 6 families, and we've still got a lot of others that we're helping, and with legal people to save them from foreclosure. It's been devastating to them.
You say that you want the money from corporate tax cuts due to the big banks to be set aside for victims of their misconduct. You also say you want the banks to lose the tax relief following their inexcusable behaviour exposed at this Royal Commission. And the other thing you've said, and so many people would agree with you, I mean, the taxpayers should not have to pay the bill for this Royal Commission.
Correct.
It should be the banks.
Exactly right. I'm not saying a carve-out from the corporate tax cuts to the banking sector, and I'll explain that in a minute. What I'm saying is the corporate tax cuts come into effect from 23-24 and further ones in 26-27. These, the Royal Commission, which is now to date around about $70 million and growing, because this is going to be for about a year, that should be paid for out of corporate tax cuts that they would actually get, plus also compensation to the families. The people that have had the wrong done by them, by whether it be AMP or whether it be, by the banking sector, that they should be compensated. And meaning, I don't want to see them have to put their claims into the courts and actually have to go up against the banks and, all their monies. I want to see it I'm just trying to think, mediation with the banks, so that lawyers are not going to be rubbing their hands together. Now, it's quite clear these people should be able to put in their claims and negotiate with the banks rather than court cases, because a lot of these people, they're not up to it anymore. They have been going through this for years and years. It's affected their health, their well-being. They've lost family members who have suicided over this, and I don't want to put them through that again. So, this is going to add up to a lot of money. If not hundreds, it will be thousands of families have been affected. Why I don't want the banks to carved out of the corporate tax cuts altogether is because a lot of the bank shares are owned by the ordinary mums and dads and self-funded retirees. They shouldn't be persecuted because of this. And I think that come down heavy in the legislation on the CEOs and senior executives that have done the wrong by the people. Legislation is there that they should be jailed over it, but that's another issue. Let's deal with that separately. But I just want this handled properly. I've sent a message to Matisse Cormann yesterday, but he was flying out from London to Berlin. So I've actually will be having discussions with him of doing this, but I'm not going to renege on passing the corporate tax cuts.
So you're not going to renege on passing the corporate tax cuts, but where does that leave the Darren Hinch side of things? Because Darren Hinch, he's questionable in reference to supporting these corporate tax cuts at this point in time, isn't he?
He is, they haven't got him over the line. The whole fact is Darren has been on about the banks getting this corporate tax cut, but like I said, he's not thinking about the shareholders and the superannuation, because that's tied to this as well. So you're going to affect a lot of people. Darren Hinch got it wrong with the ABCC, and he got it wrong with the 15% backpackers tax. Now, I don't want Darren to get this one wrong. Corporate tax cuts must happen in this country if we expect to keep businesses viable in this country. They are doing it tough with increasing cost of tax to the energy costs. And a lot of the companies that I've spoken to, they're just about to go under. We've got, and I'll tell you one point, here we're having electricity costs rising in 2020. One company is actually going to go from $350,000 up to $553,000 a year in electricity costs. They've already put $1.2 million in solar panels on their roofing. They are actually considering, they're international, sell internationally. They've got 55 employees and sell to 50 companies. I've got another company that says we can't stay here anymore. So you've got to actually start some relief. If we lose these companies, there will be job losses. Then that will be a flow on to people who are trying to pay mortgages and keep their heads above water. We've got to think this through carefully and do it the right way.
Power to you, we'll follow it. And your comment about this could go on for longer than 12 months, goodness me, the bill for a Royal Commission that lasts longer than 12 months would be millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Well, that's right. Now, also in that, I want to see liquidators, administrators, receivers and managers drawn into this. I would like to actually see an investigation into the mortgage insurance, that people are forced to take it out if they borrow over 80%. Where's that money going? So these are things that need to be investigated. Liquidators, all these people, the receivers, they have been gouging people of their monies. In one case, we had a Senate inquiry, which I couldn't get the Royal Commission from the Prime Minister, but I said, we actually badgered them, we got a Senate inquiry. I said, look, let's get this, we get the information out there, that will be a foot in the door to get a Royal Commission. What happened was that prior to our Senate inquiry report being handed down, the night before, the day before, they actually called for the Royal Commission. The writing was on the wall, but the Prime Minister was slack in actually calling for a Royal Commission into this. It's bigger and it needs a further investigation into these other areas.
Thank you for your time this afternoon, Pauline Hanson. It's been lovely chatting with you.
My pleasure. Bye, Brent.
Bye-bye.